Her in-laws tore away her clothes, until the lone rancher claimed her. "You're with me now." Jane Warren, a girl whose skin was hardened by the sun, and whose eyes, the color of autumn leaves, held firmness and weariness, stood on the scorched plains of Texas, feeling nothing but burning shame. The wind, raising dust, seemed to mock her helplessness, and the rays of the midday sun mercilessly burned her already sunburned skin on her shoulders and chest, which only an hour ago had been covered by her favorite calico shirt. The clothing she wore with such pride was now scattered in rags across the dusty ground, and her own husband, Jacob, stood aside and silently watched as his mother and sisters finished their work. "You are not worthy to bear the name McMurphy, Hester," Jacob's mother hissed. Her face wrinkled and dry as parchment, and a cold fire of hatred blazed in her eyes. "No girl from your poor family will dare to claim our land." Jane had been married to Jacob for only 3 months, but in that time she had known more humiliation than in all her previous life. The McMurphy family, who owned a vast ranch and considered themselves the true aristocracy of the Wild West, had disliked her from the very beginning. Their hatred was blind and all-consuming, and they did not hide it for a minute. They wanted Jacob to marry the daughter of a wealthy neighbor, not a simple, though beautiful, farm girl who brought nothing but empty hands into their house. Today their patience snapped. While Jacob was away in town for provisions, the twin sisters Sarah and Emily, and their mother Hester, staged a real massacre. First, they threatened to kick her off the ranch if she didn't leave on her own. And when Jane refused, stating that she loved Jacob and had every right to be there, they attacked her. Hester grabbed her by the hair, and Sarah and Emily began tearing at her clothes. "Look," Emily said mockingly, "now even your miserable clothes are torn. Just like your place in this house." Jane didn't resist, not because she couldn't, but because she didn't want to. She didn't want her hands to be stained with their blood. She didn't want Jacob, when he returned, to see that she had become like them. She silently, with unbending dignity, endured their humiliations, and this, it seemed, angered them even more. They wanted to see her tears, her pleas, but she stood with her head held high, her eyes filled not with fear, but with icy rage, and this feeling grew in her with every second. It was not just anger, but a fury that rose from the depths of her soul, an anger that made her stronger. She would not let them break her. She would survive. Suddenly, the sound of hooves echoed. A lone rider appeared on the hill. "Jacob!" Hope flared inside Jane, and the McMurphys paled. But it wasn't Jacob. It was a tall, strong man in a dark hat, his face covered in dust, and his eyes gleaming like two sharp stones. He dismounted, his movements confident and measured. In his hands was a long whip that he held casually. He didn't look at the McMurphys, his gaze was fixed on Jane. He seemed to see not just torn clothes and a humiliated girl, but her inner strength. "What's going on here?" His voice was deep and low, like a clap of thunder. "I was just passing by and saw that not everything is right here, ladies." Hester backed away, her face as white as chalk. She knew this man. Everyone in the area knew him. This was Jonathan John Harper, a solitary rancher, owner of the Blood and Dust Ranch, who lived far from everyone and rarely appeared in town. They said he was a former soldier or even a criminal, but no one knew for sure. He was avoided, but also feared. John Harper slowly approached Jane. He didn't look at the women who stood aside, he simply took his thick leather jacket from his shoulders and draped it over Jane's shoulders. It was heavy and smelled of dust, horse sweat, and tobacco, but it gave her a sense of safety. He gently held her by the shoulders. His gaze was soft, but an undeniable resolution was readable in it. "You're with me now, girl," he said quietly. "I'm taking you away from here." Jane, not yet recovered from the shock, could not answer, but instinctively nodded. This was not just a savior, it was her only chance to survive. Hester, recovering from the shock, screamed, "Don't you dare! She's my son's wife. She's our property." John turned. His face was stern, and fury flashed in his eyes. "Property? You treat your property so badly that it needs to be rescued. You disgrace your husband's name and his memory. I saw how you tried to humiliate this girl. You will beg me not to tell Jacob about this when he returns." He threatened them with his whip, and the women recoiled in horror. He knew what to press on. Shame was worse than death for them. Hester could lose her influence in society. Her daughters would never be able to get married again, and the ranch would be covered in disgrace for years. "And now," he continued, his voice becoming even more menacing, "get out of my sight. And don't you dare come near this girl again, unless you want me to come back here and shut down your ranch for good. And tell your son that his wife is with me now. He knows where to find me." He turned to Jane, and his voice became soft again. "Let's go. I have another horse we can get to my ranch before sunset." Jane, without hesitation, followed him as John approached his horses. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but not from fear, but from the realization that her life had changed once and for all. She knew that an unknown future awaited her, but it was better than what had been. "My name is Jane," she told him as he helped her onto the horse. "John," he replied, mounting his horse, and they set off. It seemed to her that this was not just a man, but fate itself, which had snatched her from the clutches of hell and given her a second chance. She cast one last look at the McMurphy ranch. Now she saw it not as a home, but as a prison. It hurt that Jacob, whom she loved, could not protect her, but at the same time, she felt relief. He was not as strong as she thought, and this man, who simply appeared out of nowhere, turned out to be her true savior. She didn't know what awaited her, but she was ready for anything. She was ready for a new life, for new challenges, for a new struggle. The one thing she knew for sure, she would never be the same again. With every step of the horse, moving away from the cursed ranch, the pain, anger, and humiliation gave way to a new feeling of hope. She was weak, but alive, and that was enough. The journey to John Harper's ranch was long. The sun was almost touching the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. When they approached a low hill, Jane saw before her not just a house, but a real fortress. A large, sturdily built log house, surrounded by a high stockade, behind which corrals and barns were visible. It was not the luxurious McMurphy ranch, but a place built for survival, for protection from the wild, ruthless world. John dismounted with an ease uncommon for a man his age, and helped Jane get off her horse. His hand, strong and warm, gently held her by the waist. A shiver ran through her body at his touch, but not from fear. She felt that she was finally being protected. "We're here, Jane," he said, his voice quiet, but with a hint of weariness. They entered the house. Inside, it was clean and spacious. In the center of the room was a large stone fireplace, where logs were already burning, and on the walls hung hunting trophies, rifles, and old maps. Old, time-worn weapons, which seemed to never rest, were scattered everywhere. John lit a kerosene lamp, and its soft light filled the room. "Make yourself comfortable," he said, pointing to an old sofa covered with a bare skin. "I'll get you some water now so you can watch." Jane sat on the sofa. Her body was tired, and her mind was still in shock. She couldn't believe that an hour ago she had been humiliated and driven out of her own home, and now she was sitting in the house of a stranger who seemed ready to protect her from the whole world. John returned with a bucket of hot water and a bar of soap. "I don't have a bathtub, but you can wash here," he said, placing the bucket next to the sofa. "And I'll go get some provisions. You must be hungry." He left, leaving her alone, and Jane felt her heart begin to calm down. There was something about his presence that inspired trust, something that told her she was safe. She washed herself as best she could and put on one of John's old but clean shirts, which he had left on the sofa. It was too big for her, but it was better than nothing. She felt small and defenseless in these clothes, but at the same time, she felt that she belonged in this place, that it had become her new home. When John returned, he brought with him a large plate full of stewed meat and beans. They sat down at the table, and silence fell over the room. They ate in silence, but it was not an awkward silence, but a silence filled with understanding and compassion. After dinner, John told Jane about his life. He was a former soldier who had fought in the Civil War. He had lost his family in battle and, after that, decided to leave civilization. He bought this ranch and lived alone, raising cattle and hunting. He didn't like people and didn't trust them, but something about Jane made him change his mind. He saw in her the same pain and the same resilience that he saw in himself, and it attracted him. "Why did you help me, John?" Jane asked, her voice quiet. He looked at her, his eyes deep as two wells. "I saw how you were treated. It was wrong. You didn't deserve it. No one deserves such treatment. What if Jacob comes for me?" "Let him come," he replied, his voice firm. "I'll talk to him, and I'll tell him that you won't go back to him. If he can't protect you, if he can't protect his wife from his own family, then he doesn't deserve her." Jane felt tears streaming down her cheeks. She had held them back for so long, but now, in safety, They came out. John silently, with a kind of paternal tenderness, put his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned against him. He didn't offer her words of comfort, he was just there. And that was enough. He seemed to understand that she didn't need words. In that moment, as she sat in his arms, Jane felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. A feeling of compassion. She sympathized with this lonely man, who lived far from everyone, having lost his family and friends. She felt that she was not alone, that she had another chance, and that was the most important thing. She knew that many difficulties awaited her, but she was ready for them. She was ready for the struggle. They sat like that for a long time, until Jane fell asleep. John carefully picked her up and carried her to one of the rooms. He laid her on the bed, covered with soft skins, and tucked her in with a woolen blanket. He looked at her gentle, tired face, and tenderness was readable in his eyes. He wasn't ready for his life to change, but he knew he wouldn't regret it. He knew Jacob would come. He knew there would be a fight, but he was ready for it. He was ready for a fight for this fragile, yet strong girl. He was ready for a fight for her future. The morning on John Harper's ranch began with the first rays of the sun, which penetrated through the cracks in the log walls. Jane woke up to the smell of coffee and fried bacon. She went out to the kitchen, where John was already cooking breakfast. He was dressed in old jeans and a worn leather vest, and his face, covered with stubble, seemed even sterner. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, not looking away from the pan. "Deader than I have in a long time," Jane replied. And it was the truth. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe. After breakfast, John took her for a walk around the ranch. He showed her his horses, cows, and barns. He spoke about his farm with a passion that Jane had never seen in Jacob's eyes. She saw that this man was not just surviving, but living in harmony with nature, that he loved his work. Jane told him about her life, about how she had married Jacob, about how the McMurphy family had hated her from the very beginning. She spoke of her pain, of her suffering, and John listened to her without interrupting, his eyes full of compassion. "You're strong, Jane," he said when she finished her story. "Not everyone could have endured what you endure, but now you have nothing to fear. I will protect you." And Jane believed him. She felt that this man was not just saying words, but that he was ready to fight for her. She felt that he had become her protector, her support. That the peace was short-lived. In the evening, as they were sitting by the fireplace, 3 riders rode onto the ranch. Jane recognized them immediately. It was Jacob, his brother Sam, and their father, old Robert. "They're here," Jane whispered, her heart pounding like crazy. John stood up, his face as hard as stone. He took a rifle from the wall and went to the door. "Don't be afraid," he told her. "I'll handle everything." He went out onto the porch, and the 3 men dismounted. Jacob looked angry and confused. His father looked like an old, angry hawk, and Sam, as always, was ready to pounce on the first person he didn't like. "Where's my wife, Harper?" Jacob shouted, his voice trembling with anger. "She's with me," John replied calmly. "I took her because you couldn't protect her. She's my property." Robert roared, "Give her back, or I'll take her myself, and you'll regret it." John raised his rifle. "You old fool, you talk about property, but you treat her like an animal. You disgrace your family name. Give up, Harper, or we'll shoot you." Sam shouted. John smirked. "Try it. I'm ready for a fight. But are you, McMurphys, ready for the consequences? Are you ready for your little secret to become public knowledge? I'll tell everyone how you treated your daughter-in-law, how you tried to humiliate her, how you tried to tear her clothes. Do you think your reputation can withstand such shame?" Jacob, Robert, and Sam, as if on command, paled. They knew that John wasn't bluffing. They knew that he was a loner, that he had nothing to lose, and that he could tell the whole truth in town. John lowered the rifle. "You have a choice. You can leave now, and no one will know anything. Or you can stay and fight. But I promise you, it won't be an easy fight." Robert looked at Jacob, then at Sam. He knew they couldn't defeat John, and he knew that their reputation was more important than their pride. "Jane," Jacob said, "come back. I'll protect you." "You couldn't protect me then," she replied, coming out onto the porch. "You silently watched as your family humiliated me, and then you came back just to take me back." "No, Jacob, I'm not coming back." Jacob lowered his head, his face full of despair. He realized that he had lost her forever, and not because she didn't love him, but because he couldn't be a man. "Get out," John said, his voice cold. and don't come back. And tell your mother that I'll be back to talk to her." Jacob, Robert, and Sam, silently, with their heads bowed, got on their horses and rode away. Silence fell over the ranch again. Jane looked at John, and her heart was full of hope. He had saved her. He had protected her. He had shown her what it was to be a real man. He had shown her that there were people she could trust. The next days on John's ranch were filled with work and silence. Jane helped him with the chores, feeding the cattle, tidying the house, cooking food. She did this not out of a sense of duty, but because she felt needed. She saw that her work was valued, that she was respected, and this gave her strength. John, in turn, watched her. He saw how she was transforming from a humiliated, frightened girl into a strong, confident woman. He saw how fire of determination was now kindling in her eyes, which had recently been full of pain. A connection grew between them, not a romantic one, but something deeper, based on mutual respect and understanding. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace, John, putting down his cards, looked at her. "What are you going to do, Jane?" "I can't keep you here forever." "I know," she replied quietly. "But I can't go back to Jacob. I can't live with his family. I want to start a new life, but I have nothing." "You have me," John said, and his words sounded like a vow. "I'm ready to help you. But for that, we have to act together. We need to get what rightfully belongs to you." "What do you mean?" Jane asked, her heart pounding with intrigue. "Your dowry," he said. "Your father gave Jacob cattle and a plot of land when you got married. It's rightfully yours, and I'm sure his family has no intention of giving it to you. But how will we do it? They won't just give us anything." John smirked, a predatory fire gleaming in his eyes. "They will. We'll give them a choice: either give up what's yours, or lose everything." The plan was simple and daring. John suggested that Jane return to the McMurphy ranch with him, but not as a victim, but as a mistress. She was to demand her dowry, and if they refused, John would threaten them by telling everyone about them, that their reputation would be destroyed forever. Jane didn't hesitate for a minute. She knew it was risky, but she also knew it was her only chance. She couldn't afford to live depending on the grace of John or anyone else. She wanted to be free, independent. The next day, at dawn, they set off. When they approached the McMurphy ranch, Hester was waiting for them on the porch. Her face was pale and angry, and hatred was readable in her eyes. "You've returned, you ungrateful girl," she hissed. "You don't belong here." Jane dismounted, her head held high, and a fire blazed in her eyes. "I've come back for what's mine, Hester. For my dowry, for the cattle and the land that my father gave to Jacob. And I won't leave until I get everything down to the last cent." Hester smirked. "You'll get nothing. Nothing. Otherwise, we'll beat it out of you by force." At that moment, Jacob appeared, followed by Sam and Robert. They surrounded them, their faces full of rage. "Get out, Jane!" Sam shouted. John, without saying a word, took a revolver from his belt and pointed it at Hester. He didn't intend to shoot, but his gesture was convincing enough. "You talk about force, Sam. You want to measure strength with me. I wouldn't advise it. And you, Robert," he said, turning to the old man. "Are you ready to lose everything you have just because of your greed and pride? If you don't give Jane her dowry, I'll tell everyone in the area how you treated her, how you tore her clothes, how you humiliated her. You will be exiled from society. You will be disgraced for the rest of your days." Robert looked at John. He knew this man wasn't bluffing. He was ready to do anything to protect Jane, and he understood that John was telling the truth. Their reputation, which was their only wealth, would be destroyed. He slowly nodded. "Fine. You'll get what you want, but I never want to see you again. And you, Jane," he turned to her, "if you show up here again, I'll do everything to make you regret it." "I wasn't planning on coming back," Jane replied, her voice as firm as steel. "I'm leaving, but I'm not leaving alone. I'm leaving with what rightfully belongs to me." Robert, Sam, and Jacob, humiliated and defeated, stood aside as Jane and John led away the cattle and took everything that belonged to her. Jacob, with his head bowed, looked at Jane, who seemed to be a completely different person. She was not just his wife, but a strong, independent woman whom he had lost forever. As they rode away, Jane cast one last look at the McMurphy ranch. She felt neither hatred nor anger, but only satisfaction. She had won. She had restored justice, and she had done it with the help of a man who had appeared in her life when she least expected it. Life on John's ranch was now in full swing. The herd that Jane had brought with her, although small, was strong, and the land she had won back turned out to be fertile and suitable for pasture. John and Jane worked side by side, building new corrals, mending old barns, and planting wheat. There were no formalities between them, only a silent understanding and deep respect. They had become partners, and this union was stronger than any marriage. Jane blossomed with each passing day. She was no longer the frightened girl whom John had met on the road. She was a strong, independent woman who knew her worth. Her hands, so recently soft, were now covered with calluses, and her face, hardened by the wind and sun, seemed even more beautiful. A fire shone in her eyes that spoke of determination and strength of spirit. One evening, as they sat by the fire, John looked at her, and tenderness was readable in his eyes. "You've changed a lot, Jane," he said. "You've become even stronger than you were." "That's thanks to you, John," she replied. "You gave me a second chance. You showed me that I could be strong. You saved me." John smirked. "I didn't save you, Jane. I just showed you the door. You opened it yourself and walked through it yourself." At that moment, Jane realized that her feelings for this man had become something more than just gratitude. It was love. A love that was born out of respect, compassion, and a common cause. She realized that he was not just her protector, but a man who saw in her not a victim, but an equal partner. She felt her heart beat faster when he was near, that her soul sang when she heard his voice. "John," she began, but did not have time to finish. At that moment, the sound of hooves echoed, and strangers rode onto the ranch. There were 3 of them, and they were dressed in dusty clothes, and their faces were hidden under hats. They dismounted and took out their rifles. "Where is she?" "Harper," one of them shouted, his voice rough and sharp. "Where is that which you stole from the McMurphy family?" It was Stephen McGinnis, one of the most famous bandits in the area. He was a long-time enemy of John's, and he had come to settle scores with him. John stood up, his hand reaching for his rifle. "What are you doing here, McGinnis? Get on your way before I shoot you." "I came for your head, Harper," Stephen replied, his eyes gleaming with fury. "I came for you and for that girl, and I won't leave until I get what I want." Jane stood next to John, her heart pounding in her chest, but not from fear, but from anger. She knew that this man had come not for her, but for John, and she couldn't let him harm her savior. "Leave, Stephen," she said, her voice as firm as steel. "You have no chance here. You came not for me, but for John, and I will not let you harm him." Stephen laughed. "You think you can stop me? You're just a pathetic girl." But at that moment, a shot rang out, and a bullet whistled past his head. It was John. He wasn't going to give up without a fight. "Get out, McGinnis. Right now, or next time I won't miss." Stephen, realizing that he couldn't defeat John, got on his horse and rode away. His face was pale with fear. He knew that John wasn't bluffing, and that he was ready to do anything to protect Jane. Jane looked at John. He was ready to risk his life for her. He was ready to fight for her. And that was the most important thing. She could no longer hide her feelings. She went up to him, hugged him, and gently kissed him. John returned her kiss, and in that moment they realized that their union had become not just a partnership, but something more. He was her love, her protector, her support, and she was everything to him. Life on John's ranch went on as usual. Days turned into nights, and with each passing day, his relationship with Jane became deeper. They worked together, ate together, and slept in the same room. Jane felt happy, but at the same time, she couldn't shake the feeling that John was hiding something. He was a reserved person who didn't like to talk about his past. One evening, when Jane was already asleep, she woke up to the sound of John talking to someone in the bar. She went to the window and saw that he was talking to a person who was dressed in black clothes and was hiding their face under a hoe. They spoke quietly, but Jane could make out a few words. They spoke of an old feud, treasures, and that the McMurphys shouldn't know. Jane couldn't believe her ears. She knew that John was not a simple rancher, but she didn't think he was involved with bandits or criminals. She felt her heart begin to beat faster with shock. She wanted to wake him up and ask what was going on, but she couldn't. She was afraid that he might not trust her, that he might leave her again. The next day, Jane decided to talk to John. She approached him as he was feeding the horses and said, "John, I need to talk to you." He turned to her, his eyes full of worry. "Has something happened, Jane? I want to know who was in the barn last night," she said. John tailed. He hadn't expected her to find out about it. He didn't want to tell her the truth because he was afraid she would leave him. Jane, it's not your business, he said. It's my past, and I don't want you to get involved in it. It is my business, John, she replied. I can't live with a man who hides something from me. I can't trust you if you don't tell me the truth. John looked at her, his face full of despair. He knew she was right. He knew that he had to tell her the truth, but he had kept it inside for so long that it had become a part of him. All right, he said, I'll tell you everything, but on one condition. You won't judge me until you've heard it all. Jane nodded. John began his story. He was not just a former soldier, but a man who had been involved in one of the most famous train robberies in the history of the Wild West. He and his gang had stolen gold that was hidden somewhere in the mountains, but they were betrayed, and everyone but him died. He had left civilization because he knew he was being hunted, and he didn't want anyone else to suffer because of him. That man I was talking to last night is an old acquaintance who came to tell me that the McMurphys found out about my past, he said. They know about the gold, and they want to find it. They know that I know where it's hidden, and they won't stop until they find it. Jane listened to him, and her heart was full of compassion. She understood why he was so reserved, why he lived alone. He was not just a rancher, but a man who carried a heavy burden from his past. I'll help you, John, she said. We'll find this gold together, and we'll defeat the McMurphys together. We won't let them harm you. John looked at her, his eyes full of surprise. He hadn't expected her to stay with him. He hadn't expected her to protect him. He thought she would be afraid and leave, but she stayed. And that was the most important thing. Now that they were together, they were ready for a new battle. A battle for their future, for their love. And they wouldn't let anyone stand in their way. The news of the gold spread through the area like a wildfire. The McMurphys, crazed with greed, began to gather a gang to find the gold and deal with John and Jane. They didn't know that John was ready for it. He and Jane had developed a plan. They would not run, but would meet the enemies on their own land. Jane helped John prepare for the fight. She cleaned the rifles, loaded the cartridges, and prepared food. There was no fear in her eyes, only anger. She was ready to fight for her new home, for her love, for her new life. She knew that the McMurphys would not stop until they got what was theirs, but she also knew that they would not be able to defeat them because they were together. When they were ready, they mounted their horses and set off. They rode along a dusty road that led to the mountains, and they felt that something that would change their lives forever was waiting for them. When they arrived at the place, they saw the McMurphys. There were about 10 of them, and they were armed to the teeth. Among them was Jacob. He looked tired and exhausted, and pain was readable in his eyes. He didn't want this fight, but he couldn't disobey his father. So you came, Harper? Robert shouted. Did you think we would give up? Did you think we would let you take our gold? That's not your gold, Robert, John replied, his voice as hard as stone. This is the gold that my gang and I found, and it belongs to me, and now to Jane, and you, he said. Turning to Jacob, did you think I wouldn't come? Did you think I would leave her after you betrayed her? Jacob couldn't answer. He lowered his head. He knew that he had lost Jane forever, and that was his greatest punishment. The battle began. Rifles fired, and the air was filled with the sounds of shots and screams. Jane, who had learned to shoot from John, fired with such accuracy that the McMurphys were amazed. She was not just a girl, but a warrior who was ready for a fight. She fought for John, for her love, for her future. John fought like a lion. He shot with such speed and accuracy that the McMurphys couldn't get close to him. He was not just a rancher, but a true hero who was ready to risk his life for Jane. He was ready to die for her. And that was the most important thing. In the end, the McMurphys were defeated. Robert, Sam, and the others were arrested and sent to town, where prison awaited them. Jacob was pardoned, but he had to leave town to start a new life. He left alone, and he knew that he would live with that feeling of pain for the rest of his days. John and Jane were left alone. They stood on the battlefield, and satisfaction was readable in their eyes. They had won. They had restored justice. They were free. Several years passed. John and Jane got married, and their ranch prospered. They became known in the area not only for their hard work, but also for their story. The story of how a lonely rancher saved a girl from her family, of how they together defeated injustice. Jane gave birth to a son whom they named Jim. He was like his father, strong, brave, and kind. He was their pride, their joy, their future. Jane and John lived in love and harmony, and their home was full of laughter and happiness. They never forgot what they had to go through, but they learned to appreciate every moment of their lives. They realized that the most important thing is not wealth or power, but love, respect, and loyalty. One day, as they were sitting by the fireplace, Jane, looking at Jim, said to John, "I never thought my life would change so much. I thought I was doomed to suffer, but you showed me that's not the case. I just showed you that you have strength within you, Jane," he replied. "A strength that you didn't see. You are the strongest person I had ever met, and I'm proud to be your husband." Jane hugged him. She knew he was telling the truth. She was strong, and she was happy, and that was all she needed. Conclusion: this story, unfolding in the vastness of the Wild West, has a deep meaning that is still relevant today. In a world where many value the material, it shows that true strength is not power or money, but the ability to be human. Jane's story is a story of how humiliation can become a catalyst for growth. She was a victim, but she did not break. She found the strength within herself to fight for her dignity and freedom. Her story teaches us that even in the most hopeless situations, there is hope, and that each of us can find the strength within ourselves to overcome difficulties. John's story is a story of how loneliness can be healed by compassion. He was a reserved person who had lost faith in people, but Jane, with her strength and her vulnerability, was able to open his heart. His story teaches us that no one should be alone, and that love and friendship can heal even the deepest wounds. The McMurphy's story is a story of how greed and pride can destroy everything. They had everything, but their insatiability and anger led to their downfall. Their story teaches us that material values have no meaning if they are not accompanied by kindness and respect. This story is a reminder that a true victory is not about taking something from others, but about building something of your own. Jane and John did not just defeat the McMurphys, they built a new life based on love and respect. Their story inspires us to seek our own path, no matter what obstacles may arise on our way.